Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear stories of someone brave enough to bear it all. Let's get naked. Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. This is exciting because like 7 or 8 months ago, I reached out to Julio and Kate, and it just took forever to get on board. So introduce yourselves and tell us all about you.
You can go first.
No, go for it.
I'm Julio Mariscal. We're actually both 33. Birthdays are just a few days apart.
Yay.
We did not plan that. I'm a surgical technologist, currently traveling, usually take contracts every 3 months, and then we'll just travel full-time with the family to wherever my job is. I don't usually know where it's going to be until we're about right now in my contract. So I'm about 3 to 4 weeks till the end of my contract, and then I'll start looking for a new job. So that's a little about me.
I'm Kate. I'm a nurse, but I stay at home and homeschool the kids. We do live in a 22-foot trailer now, which he didn't mention. But so I stay at home with them and homeschool while he works. And then shortly, especially because of COVID, the next contract, I will be going back to work and he'll stay home.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I love that. That's really great because you guys get to split off. One of the jobs that I love, and I always tell my kids, like, if you want a job where you get to travel and you get to make decent money and experience things, is exactly what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of versatility to it.
Well, you get to see something different every couple of months, and if you're on board for the traveling part of that. So that's how you guys decided to move into an RV.
Kind of.
So we
yeah.
always talked about traveling. Like that was always her dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It took me a while to kind of get on board. But as we worked at the same hospital for a while as full-time employees, and eventually we just got tired of them cutting our benefits and the politics and all that. Finally, one day I came home and I was like, honey, like I'm over it. I need to do something else. And I randomly clicked on a job posting for Maine. And when I looked at the map, I zoomed in and it was so close to the ocean. I was like, oh, we got to go there. And she was working as a school nurse at the time. So it was summer and she's like, hey, it's like a paid vacation. Let's try it. And
what a great way to think of it. Okay.
It kind of worked out. That's how it started.
Yeah. So we looked it up and we didn't know that it was such a high tourist area. So we were going to do housing, rent a house or hotel, long-term apartment, something like that. And it was $1,800 a week. I mean, yeah, like it more than our mortgage for our home in just a week. So finally we were looking at RVs. And he called a campground, Beaver Dam Campground in Maine, and he's like, hey, we're looking at these dates. We aren't sure yet. And they're like, oh my gosh, those dates just opened up. We have no other openings for the entire season, but the exact dates you need on this one site. So we went ahead and booked it, and we went and bought an RV. So,
oh my gosh. Okay, so I didn't know all how it went. So you didn't even have the RV.
Right. No.
It was actually like in reverse order though. Like she made it sound a lot nicer than it did. We bought the RV first and then assumed that we would be able to find a campground.
I thought it was the other way around.
I called, copy pasted probably 20 different campgrounds.
Yeah.
And they were all booked. We didn't realize that the tourists were that bad in Maine.
Right.
So then this one that we went to was like a top 10 campground in the nation or whatever. And I'm like, there's no way we're getting in there, but I'll send them an email. And then they responded with, we just happen to have somebody cancel. So otherwise we would have been stuck with this RV and nowhere to work.
I thought it was the reverse.
Because the word boondocking was not in your vocabulary at that point.
Right.
And we had never camped in an RV before.
Right.
So we didn't know anything about it. And brand new to the whole situation. We had a van at the time, so we had to buy something small that could pull it. And yeah, it was just a big whirlwind, and we only had 2 weeks, so that was a big thing. From the day he got offered the job to the day we had to show up, we only had 2 weeks, so we had to have somebody house sit. We have 3 animals. We had to find somebody to pet sit. We had to find somebody to mow our grass. We had like all the little things that go along with it.
Yeah,
we had to figure out in a very short period of time,
but it worked out.
And this was supposed to be to reduce stress.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so you guys did it. You got into the RV, you went, and what happened? And Kate, I don't remember, I've read your story. Actually, I read one of your blog posts where you talked about, and I don't want to give too much away. I just want you to say enough so that you know what I'm talking about. But it was in the middle of the night. You were standing in the kitchen, crying, feeling warm. And okay, now you probably know what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh, sweet. Like I wanted to hug you so hard. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the health issues were and when they started to happen in this process. So you'll have to kind of jump in.
Okay.
On when that was. So it was the summer. There was no homeschooling thought at that point. You guys got the RV, you hooked it up. You didn't know anything at this point. And that, I mean, how much did you download information in 2 weeks about how to RV?
A lot of it was just when we picked up the RV. The guy that gave it to us did our look over. He was really good. He gave us a lot of information, and thankfully our neighbor at Beaverton, who's now a really good friend, who was like the best person we could have had, he came into our RV, looked at everything. He's like, oh, this is how you work this is how you work that. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, we had no idea. And so too, before we left, our van wasn't meant to haul, and so Julio had to put the hauling kit on the car. And then we had a second vehicle. We had a Honda Pilot that we were planning on doing most of the hauling. So we were doing the same, but we took it to a company to have it done. And it ended up that the whole back of the Pilot was rusted out so bad that they said they wouldn't haul anything in it, like not even hook up a bike to the hitch.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. And so very last minute, we had to change around everything. So those 2 weeks in between, it wasn't like, oh, let's figure out everything we need to know about RVing. It's let's figure out everything that we need to know just to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
And once we got there, thankfully, Larry and Lorraine were wonderful and just showed us the ropes, and we fell in love with it.
Her pain started way before that, like years ago though.
Yeah.
Tell me about the kids and how old. We're in April 2020 right now as we record. How old are the kids? And then we can start filling in those gaps.
So the youngest is Aurelian, and he's 4.
Okay.
And then Emiliano is 7, Evane is 10, and Xavier is 12.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and
4.
So,
okay.
Yeah, the 3 oldest will all their birthdays are all in May. Okay. And so they're soon to be.
Yeah. We have the same thing. In like 5 weeks we have like 10. I get it. It's the same for us. So you had the kids. You were the nurse. Were you always a school nurse and on the kids' same schedule since you've had kids? Okay.
No. I became a nurse. We had 3 kids by the time I became a nurse.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Hardest part of our lives, I think. But I worked at the same hospital with him, and they were changing benefits, and I was a floor nurse, and they would give us 5 patients a day with all the surgeries and everything. It was the same. They were getting the same amount of patients at night as during the day. Yeah. And I did nursing and I loved it, but it was too hard having kids, and we just didn't want to do that different in shifts. And so thankfully I learned about a job at our local DD school and got the position, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
That's so fantastic. I can't believe you got your nursing degree with 3 kids. Good job. And now your pain throughout that.
So I had adenomyosis, and it took us years to figure out, but I think it pretty much started after I had our first child.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It was just little by little, everything became more painful. So, it's hard to have sex when you're in pain, and it's hard to just function day to day. And so my period would come, and a week before and week after, I was just in the worst pain possible. Mm-hmm. And so when our youngest, right after he was born, I went ahead and had a hysterectomy. They took everything but my ovaries, even my tubes. And we thought that was it. And then the pain just came back within 3 months. It started little by little. And within the next couple of years, it was so bad again. What happened was I would go to work and I would get so bad. I would fall apart crying in pain. And even my boss, my director, had to drive me home one day because it was so bad. And so then I had the rest of my hysterectomy. They took my ovaries and we found out that I had interstitial cystitis too. And that's probably what was causing most of my pain then. I had done little things, like I never was much of a coffee or tea drinker, sometimes, but not a lot. And every morning on my way to work, I dropped off our oldest at middle school and I had 20 minutes to spare. So I was like, oh, I'll drive through and get a coffee and a muffin. And coffee every day, it's really hard on your bladder, especially with this autoimmune disease. And so within an hour or two, I was in horrible pain.
Got it.
And I've learned a lot. We both learned a lot about it since then, but she was diagnosed by the PA of the doctor's office that she was going to see, the GYN. And after I spoke with a lot of GYNs that I work with in surgery, they said it's interstitial cystitis is one of those things that a lot of GYNs or OB docs don't believe in, or they don't really think that it's a real thing. So all of these appointments and everything that she had been going to, she kept coming back thinking she was crazy, and she was breaking down and crying to me. And I'm like, you know your body more than anybody. If you're hurting, I mean, you've had 3 kids 3 different ways. Or 4 kids, but I mean 3 of them, or they're all different. And I said, if you're in pain, I know you're in pain.
Yep.
Because she wanted to have them all naturally. So I just knew, like, once we heard from the PA that was probably what it was. And as we looked it up more and more, sure enough, that is what it was the whole time.
Why do they not recognize it or think it's something that doesn't make sense to me?
I think the symptoms are hard to tell. Like, it coincides so much. And I forget the exact percentage, but it's like 80 to 85%. If you have endometriosis in some form, there's a high likelihood that you also have interstitial cystitis or vice versa.
Okay.
And so the symptoms very much overlap. And what it is when I eat different things, especially vitamin C is a big one. Like I cannot eat an orange or coffee or tea or anything. It gives me pain almost directly, and it makes my bladder spasm. And so it expands and gets very viscous and hard.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of it is probably the symptoms are masked. There's something else. And, and so
like anything else, there's a lot of studies that go both ways,
Of course.
So I did pelvic floor physical therapy, and it was supposed to be for my endometriosis. And then after my surgeries, and she, along with the nurse practitioner, they were both the ones that said, oh no, it sounds like interstitial cystitis. So my therapist was the one, she's like, you need to change your diet, and she, along with the NP, really helped change my life in a lot of ways.
You wrote the blog article about how you had to, so I've had the hysterectomy and I kept my ovaries, and then you had to go back in and remove I know what it was like for me going through that. What was it like for you going through that whole process?
It's still a battle very much. So next month it's a year since they took out my ovaries. And so I tell my mom all the time, because I think as a woman or a girl growing up, you hear about going into menopause. My mom, she's had hot flashes for 25 years. Like, they just never went away. They're a little bit better, but they never went away. And that's the most part that I heard, was just like she would get hot all of a sudden. But for me, these hot flashes is literally like there's a fireball inside of me that just, for whatever reason, started to ignite. And it is so miserable and uncomfortable. It's not just that you are hot. It's like my skin cannot stand to be on my body, and I just am imploding. And it's just so very different. And I told my mom when we were in Ohio this last time, because the mental health side for me is a really big thing. I've always struggled with depression, and the mood swings are more than I had anticipated. And just like, I've always wanted to be touched. I am a very touchy feeling person. Like, it has taken Julio 14, 15 years now to finally get to the point to realize that, like, I want to be touched every second of the day. That's how I feel love. Not in menopause. I don't want him to touch me most of the time. Like, I scoot over or I need, and it's such a big part of who I am that I feel in a lot of ways like I've lost my own identity, because I am that wife that yes, you're going to kiss me when you get home. You're going to make out with me 5 times a week, and you're,
Right.
you're not going to let your hands off of me because that's what I need. And menopause has changed all of that. It's just really flipped me as a person and who I am around.
I was really thankful that I kept my ovaries, and I remember my doctor telling me that one of them was non-functioning. He said it was dead, which doesn't make, like, okay, you're keeping necrosed tissue in my body, but it's not functioning. My right side's not functioning. But I was like, if you can leave them, leave them. And I know with my hysterectomy, because I had everything but my ovaries taken, I felt better in so many ways than I had.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a hysterectomy at 33, something's not right. So I had felt so much pain for that, like 17, 18 years. I didn't realize how much pain I was in and how regularly until I wasn't anymore.
Right? Yeah. I think when I had the first round and they left my ovaries, I think that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Then, it started to come back. And the second time around, though, I think because interstitial cystitis was still so bad that I just didn't get that. And so I don't know. In a lot of ways, I feel really let down that I let my ovaries go and still it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the part that really stinks. Like, did that make any difference in a positive way, right? Because it definitely did in a negative way.
Yeah. And maybe the pain would have been worse than with the endometriosis, because I had started back on hormones, trying to do it that way. I was still in pain, so I went off the hormones, and it's not been the happy experience that I hoped it would be, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. How long ago was the hysterectomy compared to when you moved into the RV for that first 3 months?
So I had the hysterectomy in May, and Julio was already at work.
Well, not the original hysterectomy.
Oh, the original hysterectomy, that was 3 years before.
Oh,
2.5 years.
But then the second surgery?
The second surgery I had in May of 2019. And we quickly found out that I would not be able to go back to work. IC in itself takes about 2 years to get figured out, just to be manageable and for people to return to work. So he was already, though, he took another contract in Maine because we had decided to go back.
Because we loved it so much.
Because we loved it so bad. So we were going to go back anyways. So he was gone. I ended up needing the surgery right away. My doctor got me in, so we had it in May. And then by June 1st, we decided that we were going to travel full time. So we were already in the middle of selling our house and downsizing and minimalizing, but it was a very quick turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was gone, and I was post-op trying to sell everything and take care of the kids, and it was a very, very hectic time.
You did that first 3 months and loved it. So that was a couple of years ago. You're still in the RV.
Yeah. So it was actually about a month and a half that we were all together, because by the time we got to Maine, she had to go back to being a school nurse. She has to be there, a little bit earlier, just like the teacher, so she can prepare for any new incoming students. And especially her being the primary full-time nurse, she had to look over all the charts of all the new kids coming in with all the developmental disabilities. So we were only together there actually about a month and a half for the first time in May. But it went probably better than either of us could have ever expected. I mean, we became so close as a family in general. I mean, we spend, at least while we were there, we were spending almost every day playing board games inside. And then there's, we're right along their own little private pond. So there was turtles that the kids would catch every morning. Our 2 youngest would just go out there, and without even waking us up, they would go outside and just go start catching turtles. And they'd spend hours out there. And there's a playground and their own private beach. I mean, everything was literally at this campground. And we just all became so close as a family. It was beyond what we could have ever hoped for, which is why we were actually getting ready to go back our 3rd time now before all of this happened with the COVID. So so we've been doing it ever since. So
when you left for that first trip and you came home and you go back to your job, and you moved back into the house. At what point during that situation did you realize you missed it and really wanted to do it? And when did full-time RVing come into the picture?
So when we were in Maine, we started even looking at like tiny houses, having one built before we left Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I had always wanted to be in the Peace Corps and travel and help people. And so that was just there. But we had talked before about me traveling as a nurse. And then, so when this happened and it went so great, it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is what we need to do. And this is where we need to be. And so we started looking at tiny homes. And the thing was is that we were going to spend 80 grand on a tiny home and then have to buy another car, truck,
like a half-ton truck.
Right. In order to pull it. And so we were going to spend as much money as our house. And so, we looked at that for a few months, and even after we got home, and by the way, going home after living in 22 square feet to a 2,500 square foot house, it was so incredibly overwhelming.
It was.
Yeah. It was just.
We started looking at stuff differently though. Like, why do we have all this stuff? You know, like we don't need this. We don't need that.
Right.
So then we started looking at motorhomes because we were like, okay, well, tiny homes not an option. Let's look at motorhomes. We started going to the RV shows and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, motorhomes were some were more budget friendly. I mean, they were going to be cheaper than the tiny home option was going to be. But then after living in the RV, we're like, some of the quality of the materials was about the same as our travel trailer, which the kids could easily punch a hole in any of these walls. So I think we were on Facebook or something one day, and we just came across this YouTube video of this bus called Bertha, and these people they were stationary in a bus. They built it out the way that they wanted it, and that clicked, and we just started seeing all of this bus info and all these other people who were living in buses, and that's kind of what made us jump into that.
Yeah, so we bought the bus. We started to sell our house. We put it on the market and everything, and then we decided that we were gonna go for it, and instead of maybe doing it later on, that we would buy a bus now and have it converted, and then travel in the meantime in the trailer we have. So that's what we've done.
And we do it for half the price of what the tiny home would have been.
Right.
Yeah. So you guys have taken the same, because we want to do something very, very similar. So that was the same progression. I think most of us do that. Tiny houses are so appealing because they're pretty. They look like a regular house in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And we actually, my husband and I went to California and stayed in one for a few days just to feel out the space. But it doesn't matter. They're all 8 feet wide. They're all 13 feet. Like the dimensions you have the same dimensions no matter. Right. But just to kind of do we see ourselves here? And I hated the loft bedroom. Just hated it.
I was worried that I wouldn't like it as well.
Yeah.
Like just sitting up in bed and different things. It makes it so difficult.
Nope. And so, but that's what you need to know. You guys jumped in thinking it was going to be for a couple months, 22 foot trailer, no big deal because you're not there permanently. Doing that long term with 6 of you and 3 animals, a little bit different. What's the square footage in what you're in right now about?
Maybe 100.
Yeah.
That's being very generous.
Generous, yeah.
55 maybe when I did the math. Yeah. So it's small, and we're part of the full-time families group on Facebook. And so I just last night answered a thing because a woman wants to go with her 3 kids. She's newly divorced, and she's like, I'm looking at a trailer that's about 22 foot. What do you guys think? And it's so funny because so many people are like, oh no, never. We're in a 40 foot. We want to go any smaller. And if this has taught us anything, I think that our bus is 40 feet when it's completed. And so we're going to almost double our space, and it's going to be amazing. But we could totally do this a lot longer if we didn't have that in mind. Like the kids, they're not upset about their space. They never fight or argue about not having a bedroom again or not having that. They have their bed, and that's enough space for them, and they're totally happy with that. And
probably the biggest issue is our oldest is just growing like a weed, and he's kind of outgrown the RV mattress is a little bit shorter than a typical twin mattress.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's probably the only real size issue that we're having right now.
Yeah, and where to put, they're all big readers, so where to put the books.
Yeah.
issue.
I mean, so we've been really, really looking more as time has gone on, and I love the bus idea, and I agree with how the RVs are made completely. I haven't been able to quite get to the bus, like have somebody build out a bus instead of that. And part of it, I know people that are looking into it. I can finance an RV and do the renovations very, very easily, right? Like I can paint it myself. I know it's a pain. I can rip up and redo the flooring. So renovating an RV and making it your own, but financing it, way easier than having somebody do the bus build. And that's the only hesitation for us.
Agreed.
I think that people look at the situation, and maybe you guys were like that before. You're in a 2,500 square foot home, and somebody's like, okay, so all your space is gonna have to fit in this 100 square feet. And you're like, there's no way.
It was very overwhelming. I mean, we would go into a room when we made the decision, like, okay, we're going to do this. We would go into a room and look at it, and we would just kind of stand there in the doorway and look at each other and just shake our head, like, where do we start? And I think we eventually just made a goal. All right, every day, we're going to fill up 3 bags to donate or give away. And that's kind of how we attacked it and looked at it. And then we got to the basement, and we had still boxed stuff from when we had moved into our home 3 years before. And I'm like, well, obviously we weren't missing this stuff, you know? It's just amazing how much junk you accumulate over time.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. No, did you even look in it? Did you look in those boxes? Oh no.
Only for the fact that there are some things we didn't completely get rid of everything. I mean, there's some sentimental things for your kids or your family that you do want to keep. Probably more so her than me. I'm the type of person, when I clean, if like we're not using it or if it's laying out, I'm throwing it away.
Yeah, that might be a male female thing, because it's that might be. I remember so I'll give you an example of something overwhelming. Before the internet, I had scrapbooks. You know, like 1993 to 2005. Man, I had one for every year, 2-inch. Like it was and it wasn't a little bit. It was shelves and shelves of them, and I loved them because they were the memories.
Yeah.
And I remember back like 6 years ago, there are places to put them digital, but it was so outrageously expensive. It wasn't even an option. And then our boxes got wet because we kept downsizing. So they went into boxes. And I opened them up, and it was devastating. Like mice had got into them. They were wet. They were so gross. And so not only could I not bring them to somebody to figure it out, and I got an app on my phone, and I would just bring one in, put a towel on the counter, and do the picture on my cell phone and save it to albums. And it took probably like 5 months to get through them. Nothing made me feel better. Like that was such a relief, because I felt like I was going to lose all of our memories.
Right.
And it was so much space. It took up so much. So I think sometimes people either are like, well, we can't get rid of this because I have to take the scrapbooks with me, these 4 huge totes, or it's overwhelming thinking about getting them to digital. Like there's this whole process in minimizing. I think we're lucky because we've done it for over 5 years now, and we just keep doing it and keep doing it, keep doing it. And that's made it like, you realize like, I don't care about that. But when you look at the size of stuff, I mean, Dane looked at one last night and he's like, this is my favorite. And I was like, that would be tough. That's a tough one, right? And I'm the one like, get the RV, we're leaving now. And then he shows me a picture and I'm like, whoa, that one's small, that's tight. And he's like, but I love the setup. I love how it's put together. So you have to, there's a lot of balancing it out, isn't there?
There is. And what we ended up doing was, we started out with 2 storage units, but they weren't full size. They were smaller. And we had one for things that we were going to eventually put into the bus when the bus was done. Yeah. And then the other one was mainly the sentimental stuff. And then over time, I think while she was back in Ohio and I was on a travel contract, she actually combined those down into one. So now we just have the one small storage unit. So we didn't completely
good job.
Everything.
Yeah.
But
it was hard work.
You know, and then also too, like there's the financial part of it for why we did it as our traveling as well, to kind of be debt free. And you know, why are we spending this extra money on this extra storage unit when we could, you know, go even smaller? So that's helped.
That's a good point though. I was more gung-ho about going small, but I was also relatively adamant that we have a storage unit. And it can
Mhm.
be probably the smallest one that they sell. But like I've had a dresser that my parents bought when they were pregnant with me and refinished. And I'm
Mhm.
turning 50 this year. So yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. So if we can't incorporate it into what we do, then I'm paying for a storage unit. So and I know that all I think about that is that shifts over time. So how I feel about it now doesn't have to be how you feel about it in another year.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
You get to change your mind.
And that's kind of what she did. She went through the storage unit and she's like, oh, well, I guess you really don't need this or want this. And
Yeah.
There's so many things too. And I mean, even moving into the camper, like what we thought we needed to bring, there's so many things. For the first 3 months, I did like a weekly clean out.
Yep.
We don't need this.
Yeah.
Why do we have it? Let's get rid of it. And I think that with the house, even that was a big thing. I'm a very big donator. And so there was a local church who helped out the women's shelter and it was a free store. And so I was like, you know what, let's get rid of it. Let's give it to them. And that way I feel better about where it's going. It's going to somebody in need. Yeah. And at the same time, we're downsizing and getting rid of everything. So that helped me.
Yeah, that definitely like changed her entire.
Yeah, like if I had to just give it to
outlook.
Goodwill or throw it away, I don't know if I could have done that for a lot of the things because I'm a very sentimental person and it's just very hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think 5 years ago when we started this, I would probably have a list of 25 things that I absolutely would not get rid of. And it's 3. There's 3, but it's like my dresser, my great grandmother's desk, that's only 2.5 feet wide. Like we'll put that into pretty much anything that we've seen. It would fit into that, and then the coffee table my father made with his own, like but you have to give yourself the process to go through that because it's hard to let go.
It was probably easier for us though than it was for the kids.
Really?
Well, so it's funny. So our oldest, he was definitely the easiest. And when we decided to go full time, it was very much a family decision. Like we all came together and made the decision together. It wasn't like, okay, we're the parents, we're just going to decide and we're going to do this. We brought the kids in and we talked to them about it. And every one of them wanted to do it. Our 7-year-old was by far the most iffy about it. But so our 12-year-old, he literally went upstairs and brought down everything he was okay with getting rid of in his room. He didn't want to get rid of his keyboard and he didn't want to get rid of his books. Other than that, anything else was fine. Yep. He was so gung-ho about it. And it's funny how it changed so quickly because when it was time to leave, it was the hardest on him.
It was literally a month out. I mean, our house was already in contract and we're ready to go. And he falls in love with this girl. Like it went from girls are girls, girls are girls, girls are girls. So then he's like, a month before we leave, I don't want to leave because I'm going to be away from this girl. And we're like, no, we're so close.
But it's interesting that like that's what it was. So as parents, we're like, don't worry, this will pass,
Right.
You can't say it like that. So tell me, you have the health issues going on that are just really hard no matter what. And then you decide to move into a really small space permanently, and you switch to homeschooling the kids. And I've homeschooled my kids before, and now we're through COVID as we record, people are forced to online school. And I think we need to make the point that the homeschooling mentality is not the same as the emergency online schooling mentality. It's a very different community, because this isn't like it was when I was homeschooling my kids prior. Right. So I had to switch gears to make it like it was when I was homeschooling. Because this is urgency and it's terrible and it's forced. You don't want these words associated with kids in school. How did you guys make that decision? And I mean, you have to, but what was that transition like?
So, I think we're still figuring things out with homeschooling. And so at first it was kind of like, well, yeah, we're going to travel every 13 weeks. That's the way to go. And do we do just Ohio schooling online through that platform, or do we find something else? And Ohio online schooling has gone through the ringer and been sued in different things. And so we decided, well, maybe not that right now. And we just kind of went off of what everybody else was doing. Like what program do you use and do you really like it? And what I found out about myself with this is that I'm okay with a very fluid schedule. So I, as a person, every day is kind of different, either with my pain or my emotional depression and things like that. So like, I don't need to get up at the same time every day and do A, B, and then C, but my kids do. And so that was really hard for all of us to transition to, because they need a schedule. They need to know, okay, I need to get A, B, C, and D done today. We're going to start at this time. I'm going to get a break and I'm going to end. And I think that's really been the hardest thing, is just having that stability for them. Like, we're still full-timing. Before COVID, we're doing, on his day off, we would do like a field trip day, but there would be 4 days and this was our schedule. And so I think that's really been the hardest thing, is figuring out what schedule works for them, what's enough in one day, what's too much in one day. Mm-hmm. And we were following the Easy Peasy Homeschooling, which is great. It's a website that's set up by a homeschooling mom or parents, I guess, and they did it for their own kids. So they give all of the information for other people for free.
Okay.
So we started that. That way we didn't have to pay for it and we could figure it out. In a lot of ways, it's worked really well. But there's a lot of things like the kids, with having 4 kids and trying to follow each one of them to see what they're doing every day, because it's not all together. It's very individualized. And so it's like, it's hard to backtrack and see and make sure that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing.
We quickly realized they need to do more stuff, as we try to separate them from the digital life. I mean, we've been very thankful that like they haven't really done much on social media, or they don't really have cell phones. They have phones they use every now and then to get on the internet, but they can't really talk to all that many people, or like we've been trying not to let them get too involved with electronics, but we've had to let them do that for homeschooling.
Yeah,
we don't have the space to carry all of their books and all of their supplies they're going to need.
Yeah, the younger ones really liked, we have workbooks and they really liked them, but they flew through them. Like, they're supposed to last a whole year and they lasted 3 months, and it was like, okay, well, what do we do now? Mm-hmm. But then our oldest, he's very smart, and so he was in the honors classes before we moved, and so to try to figure out where to place him and everything, we got him workbooks, but it just wasn't his thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we started out with Easy Peasy with him, and then the other kids kind of went to it. And then now with COVID, so many companies are giving their programs up for free. We're like, well, let's figure it out. Let's try them and let's see what we like and what we don't like. So that way next year we'll really have a foot in what we do like, what we don't like. We've had now the ability to try different ones, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
So just figuring out what the kids need as a whole and what they need individually and what you need. So what are you doing the most that's making a difference? I know you said that you get time away sometimes when you need it because the pain is pretty unbearable, and then there's depression on top of that. What are you doing on a regular basis to kind of maintain? And then you guys are switching places for work.
Yes. Yeah.
You can do the first part of that, I guess.
So,
you take baths.
I take baths in our teeny tiny 2-foot tub. I take baths. Yeah, I miss a bathtub quite a lot. But for me, when I need time, I'll walk the dogs. I'll take a bath, or I do yoga. Yeah, and that really helps. I used to go for a drive and different things. Like, I'd volunteer to go to the store, but with everything going on, we can't do that. No. I could probably still go for a drive, but I'm not going to. So,
we would argue over going to the store. Like, no, I'll go. And then she would win and be like, "Oh, okay. So do you want to take one of the kids?"
I'm like, no. I'd probably be like, "Hey, kids, who wants to go with mom?" And basically, I mean, they love me, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll go." Like, we can go, hon. I'm fine. I'll stay here. And
yep.
Why don't you go ahead and stay then? And I'm like, you just ruined it.
You ruined the whole thing, Julio. Jeez.
Yeah.
But it is important, because when you're living in such a small space and you're you're not working an outside, even at the kid working at a school with kids all the time, it's different. You're disconnecting from your home, and you're disconnecting from your kids. I mean, I've noticed that since COVID comes. I love our 10-year-old. We've talked about homeschooling her, and now I know why there were hesitations in that because, like, okay, no, this is a real thing. It's because it's more difficult to be in the same house around each other 24/7, doing everything. And then when you condense that space, that's a different element also. But you guys have been really open about saying the kids have fought less. Like, there's all of these benefits out of doing this.
Yeah. I think a big thing too is, before we came to North Carolina, we were in Ohio for 13 weeks, and it got cold. And it was very hard on us then. Like, I don't think winter RVing in this tiny space would ever be for us, because the kids going outside, the kids, like, during our school day, we'll do school, and then I'm like, okay, guys, now it's time for outside break. They have 45 minutes while I fix lunch and clean, and I have my space that they can go and do their own thing. And then they come back and they eat, and then we'll start back over again. When it was so cold outside, it really wasn't fun for them to go outside. It wasn't snowy, but it was just cold and awful, and like, there wasn't that mix up for us, and it just didn't work well. So I think being here, there's woods literally all around us, and so they can go out, they can explore, they can do their thing. And so me telling them to go outside for 45 minutes to play, they're like, yes, let's go climb a tree, make a fort, hey, can we make a fire? Like, there's so many different things and tools that they're learning and doing. It's great for them, and it also gives me my mental clarity that I need.
Yeah, I agree. I think people that do a more nomadic lifestyle tend to follow the warmer weather, one. And it's just everything's more of a pain. It's more difficult when it's cold, but especially in that situation. And the other thing about having that more nomadic RV lifestyle is that it forces you to spend more time outside. So again, you chase the warm weather, like, right. So that makes complete sense. So tell me about the swap now, because I'm so worried about your health and your pain level.
So I'm a surgical technologist, so I help doing I'm basically like a surgeon's assistant, essentially. When they ask for an instrument, I'm the person that hands it to them. I've never had issues finding a job or a position somewhere, but now with COVID going around, almost every hospital, including mine right now that I'm at, are doing non-essential surgery, or are not doing non-essential surgery. Right. So only truly emergent cases. So, I mean, they have staff that are struggling to get to work one day a week because there's just not enough surgeries to be done. So with that being said, there's tons of travelers that are doing what I do, who their contracts are getting canceled daily. And now everybody's fighting over the same few travel positions that there are because everybody's out of work.
Yeah.
So we've come to the realization that it's either going to be a big struggle for me to find somewhere, and if it is somewhere, it's going to be probably somewhere we don't want to go. So we've come to the realization everywhere needs nurses, and unfortunately with the COVID and everything going around, that's just a situation that we're going to have to swap, because we're in the same position as everybody else too. Is, there's people who are considered essential, who we talked about earlier, aren't necessarily essential, who are struggling with, okay, do I go to work or do I not go to work? And we've had that conversation between both of us. But we still have to pay bills like everybody else as well. Right. So unfortunately, we're going to have to swap because her job is more valuable at this time than mine is, until the COVID passes over.
Yeah. So now we're just looking, like, our original plan was to go back to Maine, and they have a food truck on site. And that's Julio's lifelong dream, is to have his own food truck. And so we were supposed to go and run that. And then I was going to work at a hospital maybe one day a week just to keep my skills up.
Yeah.
And now with this, we're like, well, are we even going to be able to have a food truck? Are we even going? I mean, that's a lot of money that we would have been able to take in.
They're going to let us work at the campground as well, and basically have our rent free, which is a big deal as well. So.
Yeah. So now it's like, okay, well, we don't know if that's possible, so I need to go back to work. It's really terrifying because I don't know, like this week, for whatever reason, has been an awful week for me. I've been in bed and with my heating pad more days than not. And I don't know why. Usually I can say, okay, well, I had an orange slice yesterday. So, okay. Or I drank some of your coffee. Okay. This week, I don't know what it's been. So it's really terrifying to try to figure out when I take this job, like it's going to be up to me. I'm going to have to work on my bad days. I'm going to have to put it all aside and just fight through it. And what's really scary is when I was a floor nurse, I literally did not pee all day. So I would get up and go to the bathroom before I went to work. And then 13 hours later, I would get home and go to the bathroom. And I cannot do that now. I cannot. And so it's going to be really hard. And a lot of it too now, I mean, I haven't been in a hospital in June. It'll be 3 years. And they need ICU nurses and people with experience. And I don't have that recent experience for that specific type of care right now.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do everything that I can and take classes in critical care nursing to get myself up to par, because so many other nurses that I found that have gone back to work, they don't put you exactly where you need to go according to your skills. It's just, we have people dying and you need to take care of these patients. And that's where we are.
And I hate asking her to go back to work, but unfortunately, if we want to pay our bills. Then
right. Thankfully, the bus is paid for, but at the end of the day, we still need to pay our student loans and everything else that we have. So
yeah, you're not devoid of bills when you go to the RV lifestyle. You can minimize your bills and your debt tremendously, which is a relief. Okay, so the bus was bought, paid for, that's done. The house is sold, storage units are whittled down, all of that. So where's the bus?
So we hired a company to do our bus here in North Carolina, which is why we're here. Why we took the travel assignment here. One day when we hired them to do the bus conversion for us, because we knew we wouldn't have time or space because of our HOA of where we live, we couldn't even put the bus in our subdivision. So we hired them. They were doing, I don't know, 8 or 9 bus builds at the time, plus 2 Airstreams or something like that. So we knew that they were going to be behind schedule, but they told us it was going to be done in October of last year. So here we are now.
So they're 6 months late right now.
Right. And we love them to death, and we've been very, very comfortable with them. And we went down and seen the bus and talked to them multiple times. With the COVID and everything, you know, things have gotten slowed up with deliveries and whatnot, but it is probably 90% there.
Oh, okay.
We told them actually last week or a few days ago that regardless, we're going to come pick it up here at the beginning of May and taking it as is. We'll finish up what we need to, because with everything going on, we don't know where we're going to be, where we're going to end up.
Right.
We might not have the option to come back and get it anytime soon. So that's where the bus here in just a few weeks we'll have the bus. So.
Yay. Okay. So before we do this release, I'll have to make sure that we catch up and get that information, at least to get it caught up to date. And then what are you doing with the 22-foot trailer?
Well, so our original plan was to sell it, but I don't know how many people are trying to buy trailers with everything going on. My sister and my brother have both had interests in it. I assume at this time we're probably going to keep it and then park it somewhere. We don't. To
be honest, I haven't mentioned it to her yet, but I know she'd be on board with it. I've heard of other people, if we can afford it, I've heard of other people actually renting them out or donating them to people who needed to be quarantined and isolated for 2 weeks. So if there's somewhere that we can put it and then people can go and isolate themselves at least away from their family so they don't potentially take, you know, anything home, then I'd 100% be okay with that. So
that's awesome. Well, and that's a temporary thing also. So
right.
Like that means that it's getting used for that period of time and then you could always sell it. So that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you feel, Julio, about homeschooling?
Oh, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me at all.
I think it's funny because before we started this, like we always had the conversation of who would work and who would homeschool. And hands down, I would have said he would be the one, because I'm the one with the temper. I'm the one that yells. Like, everybody I've ever worked with was like, I can't imagine you yelling. You're such a sweet person. When I get mad, I get mad. And so
Yeah.
I never imagined me to have the patience to homeschool. And it's gotten so much better. Like,
Yeah.
the kids know, like, if I say, okay, I need some time or something, they know, okay, mom needs some time.
I'm the parent though. Like, I have the patience, but I'm harder on them. So I'm like, don't play dumb. I know you know how to do this. Do it. So like,
yeah. So
I think the best and the worst comes out of us when we homeschool.
yeah. Yeah.
But I'm completely okay with it though. I don't have any
I think, like he
issues.
said the other day, like, we're trying to find a program, since so many of them are free, that we can really follow along, and it's easy to check back and see what they've done. So we're still using something other than just our own lesson plans, but it's also something that we can look at throughout the day and say, oh yeah, this is what you did, and really keep track.
Yeah.
I need something that grades it for me, because I know that I'm not going to be good at having them show me all of their work, going through and grading it, and then entering it in. I need something that does it for me, because I know I'm going to miss or overlook something. That I'm just very short term attention span.
It's great in any situation to know what you need help with. That's awesome, because then you can find that resource.
Yeah.
Julio and Kate, thank you for being on with me today. It was so much fun getting to know you guys.
Yeah, you too.